The Crusades, a struggle for religious dominance or economic gain. Introduction. The Crusades, a series of military campaigns initiated by the Latin Church between the 11th and 15th centuries, are often characterized as holy wars waged to reclaim Jerusalem and other sacred sites from Muslim control. However, their true motivations have been debated extensively by historians. While the Crusades were undoubtedly driven by religious zeal and the desire to defend Christendom, economic and political factors also played a crucial role in their inception and execution. This essay explores the complex interplay between religious and economic motivations in the Crusades, analyzing the factors that drove individuals, leaders, and states to participate. By examining the roles of faith, wealth, and power, it seeks to answer whether the Crusades were primarily a struggle for religious dominance or a pursuit of economic gain. Chapter 1: Religious Motivations for the Crusades. 1.1 The Call to Defend Christendom. The Crusades were framed as a sacred duty to defend Christianity against the perceived threat of Islam. Papal leadership. Pope Urban II's call for the First Crusade in 1095 at the Council of Clermont emphasized the liberation of Jerusalem as a spiritual obligation, offering indulgences to participants. Pilgrimage and penance. The Crusades were seen as armed pilgrimages, with participants motivated by the promise of absolution and eternal salvation. 1.2 Religious symbolism and the Holy Land. Jerusalem held profound spiritual significance for Christians. Sacred geography. As the site of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, Jerusalem was central to Christian faith. Restoration of Christian sites. Crusaders sought to reclaim and protect Christian holy places that had been converted into mosques or restricted under Muslim rule. 1.3 The concept of holy war. The theological justification for the Crusades rested on the idea of militia Christi, the army of Christ, just war theory. St. Augustine's principles of a just war provided the basis for the Church's sanctioning of violence to reclaim holy sites. Spiritual warfare. Crusaders believed their actions were divinely sanctioned, merging martial duty with religious devotion. Chapter 2: Economic and Political Motivations. 2.1 Wealth and Land Acquisition. For many participants, the Crusades offered opportunities for material gain. Loot and spoils of war. Victories in the Holy Land often yielded wealth in the form of plunder, including gold, precious stones, and other valuables. Land for younger sons. Europe's feudal system left younger sons without inheritance, making the promise of land in the Crusader states an attractive incentive. 2.2 Trade and Commercial Interests. The Crusades opened new economic opportunities for European merchants and states. Italian maritime powers. Venice, Genoa, and Pisa played critical roles in transporting Crusaders and supplies, using their involvement to establish lucrative trade routes in the Mediterranean. Access to Eastern markets. The Crusades facilitated the import of luxury goods such as spices, silk, and precious metals, enriching European economies. 2.3 Geopolitical rivalries. Secular leaders saw the Crusades as a means to expand their influence and secure strategic advantages. Control of trade routes. Dominating the Eastern Mediterranean allowed for greater control over key trade networks connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. Consolidation of power. Monarchs and nobles used the Crusades to enhance their political standing and demonstrate their loyalty to the Church. Chapter 3: Overlap between religious and economic motivations. 3.1 The Role of the Papacy. The Church's involvement in the Crusades combined spiritual goals with political and economic interests, strengthening papal authority. The Crusades reinforced the Pope's role as the supreme leader of Christendom, uniting European states under the Church's banner. Financial gains. The Church collected taxes and donations to fund the Crusades, amassing significant wealth in the process. 3.2 Crusader states as economic enterprises. The establishment of Crusader states such as the Kingdom of Jerusalem created new economic opportunities. Agricultural wealth. Fertile lands in the Levant provided a steady source of revenue for Crusader rulers. Trade and taxation. Control of ports and trade hubs allowed the Crusader states to levy taxes and profit from commerce. 3.3 Individual motivations. For individual Crusaders, religious and economic motivations often overlapped. Piety and profit. Many participants viewed material rewards as blessings from God, justifying their pursuit of wealth alongside their spiritual mission. Debt and opportunity. Some crusaders joined to escape financial obligations or seek economic advancement through conquest. Chapter 4: Case Studies in Religious and Economic Motivations. 4.1 The First Crusade, 1096 to 1099. The First Crusade was primarily driven by religious fervor, but economic incentives were evident. Religious zeal. Crusaders were inspired by Pope Urban II's promise of spiritual rewards and the liberation of Jerusalem. Economic outcomes. The conquest of Jerusalem and other cities brought significant material gains to the Crusaders. 4.2 The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204. The Fourth Crusade illustrates the dominance of economic and political motives. Diversion to Constantinople. Crusaders, influenced by Venetian merchants, sacked Constantinople instead of proceeding to Jerusalem, prioritizing financial and strategic interests over religious goals. Loot and control. The plundering of Constantinople enriched the participants and established the Latin Empire, demonstrating the shift toward economic objectives. Chapter 5: Legacy of the Crusades. 5.1 Religious consequences. The Crusades had lasting religious impacts on Europe and the Middle East. Increased church authority. The Crusades solidified the Church's central role in European politics and society. Interfaith relations. The campaigns deepened hostilities between Christians, Muslims, and Jews, shaping religious perceptions for centuries. 5.2 Economic transformations. The economic effects of the Crusades were equally significant. Expansion of trade. The Crusades stimulated trade networks, integrating Europe more closely with the Middle East and Asia. Rise of merchant cities. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa grew wealthy from their involvement, laying the foundations for the Renaissance. 5.3 Cultural exchange. The Crusades facilitated the exchange of knowledge, art, and technology. Transmission of ideas. Contact with the Islamic world introduced Europe to advances in science, medicine, and philosophy. Artistic influences. Eastern motifs and techniques enriched European art and architecture. Chapter 6: The role of key actors in balancing religious and economic goals. 6.1 Papal leadership. Faith meets pragmatism. The popes who called for and supported the Crusades exemplified the dual motivations of religious and economic goals. Urban II and the First Crusade. Pope Urban II framed the First Crusade as a spiritual duty, emphasizing the importance of saving Christian souls and reclaiming Jerusalem. However, his call also served pragmatic purposes, consolidating papal power. The Crusades reinforced the Pope's leadership over European rulers and clergy. Economic and political stability. Redirecting Europe's warrior class toward the Holy Land reduced internal conflict and created an external focus for Europe's aggressive militarism. Innocent III and the Fourth Crusade. While Innocent III's call for the Fourth Crusade was steeped in religious rhetoric, its eventual diversion to Constantinople revealed economic and political opportunism. The sack of Constantinople enriched Western participants and shifted power dynamics in the Eastern Mediterranean. 6.2 Secular monarchs and nobles. Kings and nobles saw the Crusades as an opportunity to serve religious purposes while advancing their personal and dynastic interests. Expansion of power. Monarchs like Richard the Lionheart used the Crusades to enhance their prestige, reinforce alliances, and expand influence in the Mediterranean. Territorial ambitions. Nobles, particularly younger sons who lacked inheritance prospects under primogeniture, pursued land and titles in the Crusader states. Financial motives. While many nobles joined the Crusades out of piety, they often hoped to recoup their expenses through plunder, tribute, and the acquisition of new estates. 6.3 Merchants and maritime powers. The involvement of merchant cities like Venice and Genoa highlights the economic drivers of the Crusades. Logistical support. Maritime republics provided ships, supplies, and financing for Crusader expeditions, profiting from their involvement. Trade expansion. By controlling key ports and trade routes in the Eastern Mediterranean, These cities established monopolies on lucrative goods like spices, silk, and precious metals. The Venetian role in the Fourth Crusade. Venice's leadership in redirecting the crusade to Constantinople.